In episode 3 of If Books Could Talk, we took a look at this gradual to find out what we could learn from just one leaf. In today's episode, we're taking a look at this very small leaf to find out, does size matter? Heather, what can you tell us about this very small leaf?
Colleen, I can tell you that it's very small. And that's about it. I think we're going to have to look at these clues that the manuscript tells us, because otherwise we're never going to be able to answer our question.
So Heather, what's our first clue? What is something that this manuscript is telling us?
I think we're going to have to read this really tiny writing, and we're going to have to figure out which text it is. Which manuscript does it come from? Who wrote it?
How are we going to do that?
Well, the text does give us a couple of clues. Here we have a very clear title of a chapter. So maybe we can figure out which chapter, in which manuscript, in which work, and maybe then we can identify which text this is. There's also a really interesting clue here in that in this teeny tiny writing you've got so many abbreviations that if you didn't know what they stood for, you would have a hard time figuring out what it actually says.
So we have some sort of expert reader involved.
I think so. If we can maybe find out who is reading this, maybe that'll lead us to who's writing it. Maybe that'll lead us to which text it is. Maybe that'll lead us to something about why it's so tiny.
So speaking of the size, what can we learn about this manuscript?
Well, let's have a look. We can learn that the leaf is about 120 millimeters tall, and it's about 80 or so, 85 millimeters wide. The writing is even smaller. It fits within a box about 90 millimeters and 60 millimeters. And then when you look at each individual line, within one of those centimeters, there are 5 lines of text.
It's so small.
It's so small.
So what might that tell us?
Perhaps if we were to understand how someone would have written this and how someone would have read it, maybe that will tell us something about why it is so small and maybe who it was for.
Great. Are there any other clues? Is there anything else that this manuscript is telling us?
I think that we cannot ignore this right here in the upper right-hand corner, which is a page number, and it says 3,000.
3,000.
Seriously, 3,000? Can you imagine this little piece of parchment nestled within a manuscript of 3,000 or more leaves?
And it might not even be the last page.
I know.
So that's just so many pages. That's really surprising.
I know. I think it's time to go do some research.
Yeah. Okay, Heather, we were able to do some research, and I think you were able to identify what this text is.
These chapter titles were fantastically helpful in identifying the work. It's a work called The Breviloquium by Bonaventure, Franciscan theologian. Historians surmise that it was written about 1257, when Bonaventure was making a transition from being a scholar and theologian into being the general minister of the Franciscan order. And so he wrote it so that his friars could understand what they needed to be doing in their jobs.
Did he write 3,000 pages?
No.
Okay.
I mean, this is about the size of the Breviloquium, so I still am kind of wondering what's going on there. It's Franciscan. Let's use clue 2 to see if it can take us any further.
Okay, I know for clue number 2 that we wanted to find out more about how a manuscript like this was written.
Right.
As it happens, here on campus we have the University of Iowa Center for the Book, and I know just the person who can tell us a little bit more about that.
Perfect.
So let's call Heather Bain.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Heather. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Heather, what are we going to do today? How can we learn more about how this was written?
Well, this was written with a quill pen and iron gall ink, And so I am going to cut a quill for you guys, see if I can get one that is the right size to duplicate this lettering, and then we'll try writing a line.
So what have you brought with you today?
Well, I have brought a bunch of quills.
Yeah.
These are primary feathers from the wing of a goose, and I'll cut these into writing implements. I brought my pen knife, which is
Really sharp.
yeah, it has to be to cut the quills correctly, and
Right.
it's a special shape that makes it good for quill cutting. I've also brought some historical iron gall ink, which is the most common medieval writing fluid. It's not used very often anymore because it is acidic and can eat through paper, although
Right.
that made it work really well on parchment because it bites in. And we're going to be writing on paper, not real parchment, but we have some little pages that have been ruled with the same dimensions as the original manuscript. So we're going to try to cut a quill to the right size to copy a line from this text.
And we get to try?
You get to try.
This is so cool. In real time, that is so cool because that's about the pace that they'd be going, isn't it?
Maybe a little faster.
Yeah, but not much.
No. But so you see, even though this looks really tiny, it's still only like 2/3 of this line.
Right. That's amazing, though. That is fantastic. Thank you, Heather. That was absolutely wonderful. So we figured out how this could have been written in the Middle Ages. And I love that all our efforts, and you did an amazing job, and this is still a little bit bigger than that. So the quill, you would say that the quill then that this scribe was using is even smaller than the one you cut.
Yeah, you can see how even
Yeah.
my smallest writing there, the
Right.
downstrokes are like twice as thick.
So we've learned how this scribe wrote this manuscript. How did anybody read it?
Did they have glasses back then?
Yeah, it's quite possible that they had glasses at the time. There is surviving evidence of some different types of glasses. There's an image burned into a book from a pair of glasses with a wooden frame, where it was stuck inside the book and then left there for centuries, so we have the impression of the glasses.
That's so cool.
And just last year, there was a pair of glasses brought up out of a toilet well from an archaeological dig. So there is evidence that there were glasses at the time, which I think you'd have to have, at least over the
Yes.
course of a lifetime as your eyes start to
Absolutely.
fail. How would you keep
I
reading
know, I
that?
can barely read it
Exactly.
now.
Exactly.
But that's the question students ask us the most in classes is, did they have glasses? How did they read this? They must have had glasses.
Right. Okay, so basically what I think we've learned from this is that this writing is purposeful. You don't write that small without an awful lot of effort and an awful lot of care that goes into it, right? So that says to me then that there was a particular function for this book being so small. And when I connect that actually with the Franciscans and who they were and what their job was, they didn't stay like other monks from other orders enclosed in monasteries and abbeys. They traveled outside. And when they traveled, they took their books with them. So I'm wondering if that's why, if they wanted to travel with all, say for example, they wanted to travel with Bonaventure's works.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So they need a really small book to be able to carry around all of these texts that they need while they're traveling.
Yes.
And that makes a lot of sense, too, because the copy that we have from the first 50 years of printing, this one is from 1500, it carries on exactly that same size. I mean, this is just slightly larger.
Right.
But it's still purposefully being printed as an extremely small book.
Exactly. So size matters.
Size does matter in this case. It means that it travels.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. That was
Thank you, Heather.
You're
a
welcome.
great experience.
So we've learned a lot from clue number 2 about how this was written
Yes.
and that might have indicated it was for travel.
Right.
But we still have this mystery page number, page 3000.
Well, I think that if we look at this as page 3000, it has to be part of a larger compendium of others' works. Perhaps all of them Bonaventure's, perhaps other scholars and theologians at that time. Because this book basically comprises all of the Breviloquium. And as we saw, this book also has the Breviloquium in it.
Yeah.
And neither one need 3,000 pages.
No.
So there must have been some other works that were attached to this.
And so they put those in the beginning and bound multiple books together so that this one ends up on page 3000.
That would be my supposition.
Mm-hmm.
And that also helps us understand why it's so small. If you're carrying around that many pages, and you need that many pages together in one book, it's got to be small so that you are not breaking your back as you travel.
Yeah, you're not going to take a really large multi-thousand page book with you.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So Heather, the final important question is, does size matter?
Size matters. It matters in the way that these manuscripts were written, it matters in who read them, and it matters in what they were used for. Absolutely.
Okay, so we took a look at the clues about what the manuscript was telling us, and now it's your turn. We put the link down below to this object in the Iowa Digital Library. Use your modern tools, zoom in, take a look. Is the manuscript telling you the same thing that it was telling us? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to know more about this manuscript, check out Heather's essay on History Corps, and the link's also down below. Thanks.